Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the June installment of our Esri Law Enforcement webinar series entitled Engaging Citizens and Sharing Crime Data with Esri Maps. My name's Chris Delaney. I'm the Law Enforcement Technical Lead at Esri, and I'll be your presenter today. In today's webinar, we're going to cover a number of new capabilities that have been recently released that can enable law enforcement agencies to improve their ability to engage citizens and share data. So we'll talk about some of those new capabilities, particularly in a new capability inside ArcGIS Open Data that we call Open Data Pages. We'll show a couple examples of how customers in law enforcement are already using those pages to deliver more complete stories around data that they make available to citizens. And we'll show how you can go about quickly building an open data page around either an initiative or a particular data set that you've made publicly available via ArcGIS Open Data. In the second half of the webinar, we'll cover building configurable crime maps using ArcGIS Online, showing a couple of examples from law enforcement agencies who are currently using ArcGIS Online to deliver public crime maps to their citizens. And we'll show how you can quickly configure a public crime mapping application to help citizens ask questions about public crime data in a new way. At the end of the webinar, we'll have some time to go over some resources to get you started if you're interested in being able to leverage some of these new capabilities, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. Okay, so let's get started. All of the capabilities that I'll show you today in this webinar are part of ArcGIS Online. For many of you, if you're already a on-maintenance ArcGIS desktop customer, you already have access to ArcGIS Online as part of your on-maintenance subscription. So many of these capabilities are already things that you have access to. If you're not already using ArcGIS Online, contact your Esri account manager to see what licensing you already have access to that would enable you to take advantage of some of the things that you see today. But in this first part of the webinar, we're going to be talking about ArcGIS Open Data. ArcGIS Open Data is a very exciting capability that is included with ArcGIS Online that lets you spin up for your agency your own agency's open data site. So the ability to host public-facing data sets that you want to make available to citizens. So the data as well as mapping applications that you want to make available. So you've got a destination open data portal for your citizens to get access to critical data sets that you want to have available. This is an example of one of those sites. This is from the Rochester, New York Police Department. And the way this ArcGIS Open Data works is it's a kind of a configurable wizard-based interface that helps you build these open data sites. So it's very easy to quickly build and deploy an open data site without having to be an expert in HTML or web development. They follow a wizard-based interface, as I mentioned. This is going to help you configure and style the look and feel of your open data site to fit your agency brand and your agency style. And you can shape how your page looks by selecting widgets that have a bunch of different kind of capabilities to control the complete look of your site. In terms of the capabilities of the open data site itself, the open data site can handle not only GIS data that you host in ArcGIS Online, but it can also host things like documents and tables, non-GIS data that you want to make available to the public. For that data that is of a tabular nature or is of a GIS nature, you're going to have the ability to create charts, as you can see here. If it's GIS data, you have the ability to symbolize that data by different attributes inside of the data. Here you can see a screenshot showing Part 1 crime symbolized by different Part 1 crime types. You're able to filter the data in the open data site by whatever attributes that you're interested in. And when you're ready as a citizen using the open data site to download that, you've got the ability to download this data in a number of different ways, either just a regular spreadsheet or a KML for ArcGIS Earth or Google Earth, or a shapefile if you're a GIS user. Now you can also download data as the complete data set or as a filtered subset based on the filter parameters that you've described. And all of those open data sets are also accessible via an API. So if you have developers from the community who want to be able to programmatically access that data source to feed some kind of application that they're building, they're able to do that as well. So the open data site capability is a really exciting new component of ArcGIS Online. It's been around for about a year now, and it's one of the areas in which we see law enforcement agencies taking most advantage of the modern capabilities of ArcGIS. There's been a lot of ArcGIS users who have stood up open data portals for either their law enforcement agency specifically or as part of their jurisdiction's overall open data portal. So a city or a county, the law enforcement agency is contributing data to that open data portal. But one of the things that we hear often from law enforcement agency customers who are looking to do more with open data is, delivering open data is fine, but we want to help contextualize this data in a more meaningful way for our citizens so that they can understand it and interpret it, and we can help shape that understanding. So to that end, in our last release of ArcGIS Open Data, we've recently released a new capability that we call Pages. It's essentially a way to communicate a story around an open data set that you make available, or multiple open data sets. So these pages really are an ideal way in which you can deliver key facts through summary statistics, charts, web applications that use the data, combined with text and images to tell a compelling story that you're interested in telling. And that could be about a single data set itself, or it could be about major initiatives that your agency is doing. So for example, maybe you're doing an anti-violence initiative and you want to tell a story through various open data sets that you've made available on the impact of violence in the community and what you're doing about it. So these open data pages are really ideal for taking that next step to communicate an understanding of an open data set that you've made available. They enable a variety of different capabilities, as I mentioned. So on this screenshot from this example page in Raleigh, you can see live summary statistics on percentage of 911 calls answered within the last 10 seconds. And response times for police and fire. You've got dynamic and interactive charts as well as maps that are embedded into a story that's telling a story around what the key objectives are for Raleigh for a healthy and safe community, and what the metrics are associated with those objectives. This is another example from, it's not a law enforcement example, but this is from the Iowa Department of Transportation and their open data site that surfaces some data on winter operations. So you're able to deliver to citizens an understanding of the number of trucks that they have who are conducting winter plowing operations, total cost, total labor hours, and salt applied. So you're taking that data that you might have otherwise made available in spreadsheets, and you're now surfacing it in ways that make it understandable for citizens without having to go and download a data set and analyze that data themselves. These pages, like the open data site themselves, are very easy to configure and very straightforward. They have a number of different widgets that you can select from to build the site in whatever configuration you're interested in. So no two sites look exactly alike. They can reflect whatever kind of styling and structure that you're interested in, and you don't have to be a web designer to do that. So now let's take a look at a couple of examples of open data pages that law enforcement agencies have recently made available. And the first example that we have is an open data page that Johns Creek, Georgia put together to describe some of the police incident data that they make available publicly. So they've got some general information on the types of incidents by volume that they dealt with in 2016. They've got some simple hotspot maps. They have a dashboard that's interactive that enables you to see when you pick a particular type of call for service and see those illuminated on the dashboard. You're able to interact with individual records and get information back on each individual call that was reported. And then at the end, the link to get access to that incident data on the open data site, whether it's to download it for your further analysis or to be able to connect to it in an API or to do some additional mapping. So this is a simple way in which they're presenting the incident data that they've made available on their open data website in a more interactive way that tells a story about that data. In the same way, this is an example from Washington, D.C., and this is the Washington, D.C.'s Vision Zero open data page. If you're not familiar with the Vision Zero initiative nationwide, it seeks to reduce pedestrian fatalities and traffic fatalities to zero in jurisdictions where they're trying to implement this. So in this particular case, they've got a story map that describes the progress that they've made in DC by year for citizens to explore in terms of traffic fatalities. They've got access to various data dashboards. They've got some dynamic summary statistics that allow you to see current totals of ticketing activity and some additional charting, and then access to relevant data sets that are associated with the Vision Zero initiative. And then lastly, a open data page from the South Bend Police Department. This is their transparency hub page. So this is talking about the transparency efforts that the South Bend Police Department are attempting to make to better engage their community and demonstrate their commitment to openness. So they've got some general introductory information. They have connected to this a police dashboard that's a web browser from Microsoft Power BI that enables citizens to see a number of key metrics around crime and officer-involved shooting data. They've also created a use of force story map that helps citizens understand where use of force has occurred in South Bend and help them understand some of the spatial, temporal, and demographic patterns around use of force activity. In addition to that use of force data set, they also have a guide that's also an Esri story map to litigation. If you're going to be suing the city of South Bend, how you go about doing that. And then some additional access to some PDF documents on some organizational structure, studies on the department's organizational structure, their public crime mapping application, access to the investigation process for community complaints, and then some relevant links to specific open data sets that are available through their open data site. So again, they're trying to organize a variety of different pieces of content that are related to transparency around a unifying idea of a transparency page, and they've utilized ArcGIS Open Data pages in order to do that. So those are a couple of examples of how law enforcement agencies are using open data pages to tell more compelling stories about their data. What I want to do now is walk you through a brief example of what a page might look like, and we'll show you how to build it in real time. So this is a simple open data page that I've prepared based on some publicly available data from Rochester, New York on their shooting victims. And in this case, I've configured a year-by-year chart of shooting victims, some descriptive introductory text, a chart that shows a breakdown of shooting victims by age with access to the data, a shooting victims chart that breaks down shooting victims by race with some descriptive data. I have an application that I've already previously made in ArcGIS Online that enables citizens to look year by year to see shooting victim hotspots and see how they change over time. I've done this using a time-aware configurable mapping application in ArcGIS Online. And then lastly, a dashboard that enables citizens to explore patterns and trends in shooting victims, interrogate individual cases, see breakdowns by month, whether there was multiple victims in an incident by shooting type, demographic breakdowns. All of the charts on the dashboard are interactive with the dashboard, so you can see the results as you click them. You can see the most recent shootings and learn more about them. So a very simple page that organizes a bunch of important aspects of the shooting victims data set, but presents it in an easy to digest way. So how did I build that? Well, let's get started, and I'll walk very quickly through how you can build one of these open data pages using your own data. So the first place that I'm going to go to build one of these open data pages is my organizational ArcGIS Online site, and this is my site that I run for Esri. It's an example ArcGIS Online organizational portal for law enforcement. And I'm going to go to the My Organization tab. And if you don't have the My Organization tab in your with your access to your existing ArcGIS Online organization, it's because you need to be an administrator, have an administrator level. So if you want to build open data pages, you need to see your ArcGIS Online administrator, which is typically either someone in your IT department or your GIS manager, and to get you access to be able to start to build open data sites. And to go and build open data sites, we need to go into the settings of the organization. So I'm going to select Edit Settings and go to the Open Data tab. And if you haven't already built an open data site, you'll see a button that says Enable Open Data. I already have an open data site built, and I'm going to work under the assumption that you do too for the purposes of this demo, since I'm only going to show how to build pages themselves, not the site. So if you do need to build an open data site, please feel free to shoot me an email at the end of the webinar, and I'd be glad to direct you to some resources that help you learn how to do that. In this case, I'm going to go to the Manage Sites button, and I'm going to get to open the administrative console for ArcGIS Open Data. And it's going to show me the different open data sites that I have. And in this case, we're going to use an existing example open data portal that I've put together for Rochester. And if you'll notice in the middle right-hand corner here, I have a button called Pages. I'm going to select that, and that's going to show me the pages that I currently have active that are associated with this open data site. And I can see that I have one page already. That's the page that I've just previously shown you. Now I want to build a new page, and we'll build that page from scratch to mimic what I've already showed you. So to start, I'm going to create a new page, and I'll name it Rochester Shooting Victims Webinar Example, and press Next. And then I'm going to press the little pencil button to begin editing that page. And when I do that, it's going to provide me a de facto layout that I can use to get started. You don't have to use any of this, but it just kind of starts, it gives you a baseline. You can see there's already been some pre-established widgets here. There's been some text widgets and an image widget. And each widget has kind of three main functions associated with it. I have the ability to move it. So I can click on that, the move icon and drag it to a different position and dock it inside the site somewhere. I can insert it above or to the right or to the left. So I'm going to start by, to mimic the site that I just showed you, I'm going to start by building a chart at the top of the page. To do that, I'm going to press the gear in the upper left-hand corner. This shows all of our layout builder options. I'm going to press the layout builder tool, and I'm going to select a chart, and I'm just going to drag it onto my template page here, and I'm going to insert it above this existing text. And you see it's kind of got this icon for a chart. I'm going to press the little gear button on this chart to start configuring that chart. And I want to build a chart. I could use some custom JSON charting from the ArcGIS Cedar library if I wanted to, but in this case I'm going to use an out-of-the-box box chart. And then I'm going to find a data set. In this case, what I can see is any data sets that have been made available in my existing ArcGIS Open Data site. And I can see at the bottom here my Rochester shooting victims data set. I'm going to select that one. And I want to create a chart that shows shooting victims by year. So I need to select my attribute that has my data by year. And I have it here. It's called text year. I'm going to select that. And that's going to generate my chart. I can name my chart, shooting victims by year. And I'll make it a little smaller so it's a little bit easier to see. Now I'll click this gear again to minimize the layout window, and I can see my chart. Pretty easy to use. Now I want to use this next widget that's already here for my layout template to describe the overall page. So I'll call this Rochester shooting victims, and I have a blurb that I've already created that I can just copy and paste in here. And now I have my introductory text. From here, I want to be able to configure a couple charts that look at the shooting victim data by age group and by race. So I'll add some additional descriptive text in this next widget that's already here for me. I'll call this shooting victims by age group. And I'll add in some additional predefined text that I already have, paste that in, and then I'll get rid of this image that's already here, and I will add in its place another chart. So I'll grab a chart and I'll drag it onto my page, and I'll split this area and I'll dock my chart to the left, and then I'll press the gear to configure it. I'll find again my Rochester shooting victims data set, and I'll want to symbolize this chart by my victim age band attribute. Again, I'll decrease the height of the chart, and I'll give the chart a title, shooting victims by age group. Since I've done some work already, I want to make sure that I save this work, and then I close this gear so I can take a look at it again. So already my site's coming into shape pretty quickly and easily. I'm going to add some additional text on this next predefined widget. I'm going to call this shooting victims by race. Add some additional descriptive text that I've already pre-prepared. And then I'll add in another chart to be able to chart out shooting victims by race, pressing the gear to configure it, finding again my shooting victims data set, selecting my race attribute, changing the height to make it a little smaller, and adding a label. Okay, so I've done 3 different charts and provided some descriptive text. Now in the last two sections, I'm going to be adding in some existing web applications that I've built that I want to be able to display on this page. So before I do that, I want to kind of give them a nice big title bar to put on top of them. So I'm going to grab a banner widget and I'm going to drop it down here after my shooting victims by race chart. I'm going to call this next one shooting victim hotspots by year. I'm going to delete the subheadline. And then I'm going to add in an iframe widget that will contain the URL of my web application. So I'll go to that widget after I've just dropped it in, and now I need to paste in the URL of my web mapping application, which I have. I just need to copy it off of my trusty Microsoft Word document on the side. I'm going to increase the height of the iframe so you can see more of the application. And then it says, since the application is an HTTP, it's not a secure application, it's not rendering in preview mode, but I can save my work and I'll be able to view it later. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute, and then I'm going to add one additional app as well. So I'll drag another banner in here, and I'll call the title, I use this as a title for my second app, which is called Shooting Victims Dashboard. And then I'll add another iframe to be able to display the app. I'll configure it with the URL. And expand the height of the iframe to 800. Now I'll save all that work and I can view my page. And so, you know, we've been working through this very, very quickly, and already we were able to quickly put together an open data page that combined our shooting victims data set with a couple of different charting visualizations, as well as some existing apps that we already had that leverage that shooting victims data to tell a more complete, cohesive picture about our shooting victims data. So here's the result of the page that we put together. We've got that year-by-year chart. We've got that chart that breaks down shooting victims by age group, by race. I have my shooting victims app for hotspots, and I have my shooting victims dashboard. Hopefully, you'll agree that that was pretty easy and enables you to build robust public-facing websites to tell stories about data without having to do a lot of custom coding. And that's really the idea, to enable you as a law enforcement agency to do more with your data, with your citizen outreach, engage your citizens in more compelling ways. So that was the first part of the webinar where I wanted to kind of show some of that new capability that's become available with ArcGIS Open Data. I think it's exciting, and I hope you'll do too, and I'm really interested to see what your agency does with open data pages to deliver more robust citizen engagement capabilities. The second part of the webinar is around public crime maps. We've been seeing that more and more of you who are already using ArcGIS Online are starting to develop your own public crime mapping applications, and we're excited to continue to work with you to help you leverage configurable out-of-the-box mapping applications that you get with ArcGIS Online, in particular Web App Builder, to build your own semi-custom public crime mapping applications. And what we've been seeing from a number of law enforcement agencies is two types of public crime mapping applications. There's kind of the standard public crime mapping application that shows, it gives you a limited access to a certain amount of data from a time perspective, so it might be the current year's worth of data, or it might be the last 60 days worth of data, and it gives you some basic filtering abilities, the ability to filter by certain time frames, by a custom time frame, be able to filter by crime type, maybe day of the week or time of day. We're seeing customers using our Web App Builder tools combined with the filtering widgets to deliver those apps, to deliver very simple apps that help citizens kind of get a quick glimpse at what's going on in their community. But there's a second kind of app that we're starting to see law enforcement agencies building using ArcGIS tools that enable citizens to ask more precise questions about crime conditions in a specific community. We've been calling them as a type of app, community crime locator apps. And in this case, agencies have been using Web App Builder plus one of the widgets that's available in it called the Situational Awareness widget to enable apps that help citizens ask questions about a discrete geography. So for example, you get a citizen who calls and they say, I'm thinking about buying a house at this location. Can you tell me what crime looks like in and around that area? Well, normally that might go through, a manual process to answer that question, or the citizen puts in a FOIA request and someone has to answer that. This app enables that citizen to find that point, draw a buffer, and return back counts of crime in that area, as well as download a spreadsheet of all the crimes in and around that area. Similarly, you'd have the ability, if you were, if a neighborhood group that had some sort of irregular polygon boundary that defined their neighborhood, to be able to let them draw that for themselves and then extract out all the crimes that occurred in that particular area. I'll show you a couple examples of that kind of app in just a minute, and then we'll show you how you can configure it using Web App Builder. And just so you know, since these are pretty popular requests that we're seeing from law enforcement agencies, the ability to build both of these maps, we'll be working on delivering some free to download and use solutions that help you jumpstart a app like this in your own ArcGIS Online org later this year. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of those types of apps, and we'll build one ourselves. So the first example, as I just showed in the screenshots, comes from the Rochester, New York Police Department Open Data site. Here you can see their Open Data site and the different data sets that groups of data sets that they have available, as well as various applications that they have available for citizens to engage with. One of them is a simple public crime mapping application, and that public crime mapping application lets them look at different date ranges, so crime over the last 14 days or 30 days, things of that nature. They can pick a date range. They can filter by certain crime types if they want. It's a very straightforward, simple app that enables you to ask simple questions about crime conditions in and around your area. But the other app that they've built that I think is pretty cool helps citizens who are part of a particular neighborhood understand what historical crime conditions have been in their neighborhood. And they've used Web App Builder plus the Situational Awareness widget to do that. In this case, they start off with a map of all of the different neighborhoods in the city. I'm just going to select one very briefly. I'll select a small one so it's easy and quick. I'm going to select the Lock 66 neighborhood. And if I press on these little three buttons here, I can use this Set Location tool to trigger the Situational Awareness widget in ArcGIS Web App Builder that will then activate that widget and will start to pull back complete years of data for this particular geography. So this is taking a little bit long to run because it's calling a lot of data, but you can start to see a bunch of tabs populating here, and I can go year by year and I can see the number of crimes that have occurred by type in this particular neighborhood group. So I can see that last year we had 5 robberies, previous year we had 5 robberies, 8 robberies in 2014, 9 robberies in 2013. So generally robberies are moving in the right direction for the Lock 66 neighborhood. And in addition, if you see over here on the left-hand side, I can download that data and view that data at a record level in the spreadsheet. So it becomes a very simple way in which citizens can get historical crime data about, in this case, a polygon that's already been defined for them, their neighborhood, or you can also use this tool to self-define an area of interest. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. This is a similar version of that tool. And this is the example of the data that comes when you download the data from the web app builder. So you can get a complete data set of all of the crimes that you were interested in. So this is another example of a web application that's been created using ArcGIS Web App Builder plus the solution, plus the situational awareness widget. And in this case, we're going to use that same kind of example that we just mentioned before. So let's say I'm a member of the public and I'm interested in knowing crimes that have occurred around my home address. My home address is 123 A Street, and I want to know crimes that have been within 2,000 feet of that address. So I'm able to add that in. I'm going to set that as a location, and it's going to draw automatically a 2,000-foot buffer, and it's going to show me different time slices in this app of Part 1 crimes. So I can see that yesterday there was 5 Part 1 crimes within 2,000 feet of my neighborhood, 17 in the last 7 days, and 56 in the last 28 days, etc., etc. I can take any of these output data sets and I'm able to download them the same way I showed you in the previous app. So it becomes a very, very nice and clean way to enable citizens to ask questions about crime or other data sets nearby them in a particular area that they define. And in the example of a neighborhood group with some irregular boundaries, I can simply use the polygon tool to draw the area that I'm interested in and return back all of the crimes from that area. So I can draw an area that's not already predefined by some existing geography, and I can get that same information. And I can also interact with the map and those points in addition to being able to see the count information at the bottom. This is a powerful little widget that helps you enable a lot of self-service capabilities for citizens, and hopefully for your agency enables you to reduce FOIA requests that are of this type of nature. So how do you build something like this? Well, it's actually really easy. We're going to start with a web map that I've already built and configured that has the same data as the application that you just saw. So I have 4 layers in here. I have a last 7 days of Part 1 crime layer. I've got last 14 days, last 28 days, year to date, and crimes from yesterday. So this is all essentially the same service of data, but I have definition filters on each of these different layers that are controlling the period of time that each of these layers is looking at from the main Part 1 crime service. Once I've got my map the way that I want it to, the way that I want it in order to build the application, I press the Share button, and then I'm going to go to the Create a Web App button. From here, I can select from a number of the different out-of-the-box configurable apps, but that's not really what I want for this purpose. What I want for this purpose is to use the second tab, which is Web App Builder. I'm going to name this web application Example Community Crime Locator for webinar, and I'm going to save it in my main directory. And that's going to initiate the web app for ArcGIS Builder Wizard. And the Builder Wizard has a bunch of different configuration options for creating an app with Web App Builder. If you're not familiar with it, it provides a bunch of capabilities. The first and foremost is the ability to pick from a number of predefined themes for your app. So this is, how is the app itself laid out? And as I make selections in my wizard window over here on the left-hand side, you can see that in the main screen here, the app updates to reflect the change that I've made. So I can experiment quite a lot with different theme configurations before I make a final decision. In this case, I'm going to use the foldable theme, and I'm going to select a color which is an out-of-the-box blue, but I could also select a custom color if I needed to. And Then I can tab to the map tab, where if I wanted to pick a different map, I could. If I wanted to control what the view extents that the user has in my application of the map are, I can control that. But really the most important part of Web App Builder is configuring the widgets that go into the app. And there might be a bunch of simple widgets that I want to have available as part of this app in the first place. So maybe things like a base map widget to enable my citizens to toggle base maps. And I can use the out-of-the-box base maps that I already have access to. Maybe I also want them to have access to a legend widget. And I've got some simple configuration options with that. I might want them to have a printing widget. So if they see something that they want to be able to print out a hard copy of using this app, they can do that. And maybe a sharing widget, so that if they see something that's of interest to them and they want to share it with other people, they've got the ability to share this via email or other social media components. So I've got those kind of basic widgets that might be part of any main application that you're going to deliver to the public. But then up here on the header, I want to configure the widgets that are up there. And there's a couple that are out of the box that are up there, a layer list and a legend, that I want to get rid of. I just want to have my main functional widget up there, which is the situational awareness widget. So I'm going to press the plus button, and I can find the situational awareness widget down here. And then we have to configure it. This one's a bit more involved in terms of the configuration than some of the other ones that we've just previously showed you. I need to add all of the layers that I want to have displayed in the situational awareness widget first. So I'm going to add in, 4 different layers. I'm going to select, I want my yesterday layer, my last 7 days, my last 14 days, my last 28 days, and then year to date. And then for each of these layers, I need to define how I want the results of the layer to be displayed inside the situational awareness widget. And I've got a couple different options. I could have the closest feature be shown. I could have all features be shown in order of proximity to whatever geography that you chose. I could have kind of a simple summary, so a simple count, or I could have what I want, in this case, grouped counts. I want to use group counts because I have Part 1 crimes, and I want to be able to count crimes by each Part 1 crime type. So for all of these layers, I'm going to select group counts. And then I need to define what field I want the grouping to occur on. So over here in the actions column, you'll see a little edit button. And that will give me the group by field choice. And I will pick text general code. That's where I have my UCR crime type, this field that contains my UCR crime type. And I'll select display feature count. And I just need to do that for all of these layers as well. And then I'll be able to move on to the next part of configuring this app. So this app, we're showing this app in the context of kind of public information and getting citizens access to data. This situational awareness widget can be utilized for a lot of different applications. Its initial purpose was to help emergency managers identify critical infrastructure and other relevant resources that are nearby the location of a critical incident in a timely fashion. So it has a lot of value both for external-facing purposes as well as internal-facing purposes. You could use this widget, for example, and incorporate, instead of Part 1 crime, parolees, probationers, gang members, field interviews as a way to bring in investigative lead information into an app to support investigators or to support the process of gathering data around an event for real-time crime centers or fusion centers, for example. I've got a number of other things I can configure. I can configure the distance units for the buffers. I want them to be in feet, and I want the minimum to be 0, but the maximum buffer distance to be 5,000 feet. I want to turn routing off. I don't really need that here, but you could enable routing inside of the app. I could also include weather information into the app, but I don't need that. I want to be able to export all of the fields and want to be able to display summary features. So when I press OK, I've now got that situational awareness widget configured in my app. And then the one other thing that I want to do here is, if you'll notice in the layout area for the situational awareness widget icon, in the bottom left-hand corner, I've got a little circle. I want to click this, and that's going to have this widget by default turn on when a citizen opens the app for the first time. So I've got this app essentially the way that I want. Now let's save it. I can also take a look at previewing the app on various types of devices. So if I wanted to see how this app looks like on mobile devices, I can see that, because Web App Builder, a really cool part about Web App Builder is it's not just for building desktop-based web applications. It's a responsive web app builder, which means it will respond to the form factor that it's viewed in. So if you're viewing this web mapping application on a tablet or on a phone, the structure of the app itself will change to reflect the size of your phone, which is pretty cool. Let's take a quick look at what our configured app now looks like. So this is loading the app that we've just created. And by default, since we activated that capability, the situational awareness widget is going to turn on by default. It's just taking a minute to load. So there we can see the situational awareness widget has popped up, and I can utilize the polygon tool to draw an area of interest, and then it's going to return back all those different layers that I configured into it. So pretty straightforward. Hopefully that gives you a sense of how easy it is to configure and deploy these apps out to citizens in your organization. So resources, where do you get started if you're interested in some of these capabilities that I showed you today? Well, there's a couple of things. The first place to take a look at for ArcGIS Open Data is our help documentation. It's very rich. It's a great way to get up to speed on this. You'll find that at doc.arcgis.com/en/open-data. Don't worry about trying to quick write these links down. We'll send out an email that has links, all these links in a follow-up. We also have a forum on GeoNet for the open data, for our open data. So you can ask questions, get advice from other GIS users in the community who are deploying open data sites in their community. And there's a great blog that got put out by our open data team back in April that walks you through some of those configurations of the dynamic charts and the summary statistics in ArcGIS Open Data pages. That's a really good way to start. In addition to those resources, feel free to check out the actual agency examples that I shared with you on this webinar. They're publicly accessible, and you can mess around with these apps and these pages on your own time and get a flavor for how they work and get a sense of what you might like to take when you're building your own pages and apps for your jurisdiction. So that's all I have in terms of the content that I wanted to cover today. Kevin Armstrong, one of our solution engineers on the public safety team, has been answering your questions during the webinar, and he's also been tracking kind of the kinds of questions that you've been asking. Kevin, are there any questions that we can answer for the attendees on the webinar overall?
Sure, Chris. Yeah, we've had a few questions come up. First question was how many related to the open data is how many open data sites can you create? Is it just one site, or can you create multiple? What determines how many sites you can create?
Yeah, so there's not really any limit. You can have multiple sites, and that's a really good example. If you wanted to have an open data site, your city had one single ArcGIS online organization, but you wanted to have a separate ArcGIS Open Data site for the city versus for the police department, you'd be able to spin up two separate sites. And then for each of those sites, you'd be able to build pages associated with each individual site. So you would be able to handle them differently if that's what made sense for you from a structural perspective.
All right, and another question was just about the open data pages. Do they have to be shared publicly? Can you have those created and just viewable for people in an organization?
They do need to be be shared publicly, but the value of those pages, I mean, clearly you're thinking in the right direction. Those pages could be useful for internal purposes as well, and delivering that capability is something that our open data team is working on right now. So that's a capability that you can expect to see in the not too distant future, being able to deliver those pages internally to your organization.
And then another question just was about time-sensitive data. So we're showing data that is hosted in ArcGIS Online. Are there ways to have data pushed out more regularly? So if I have my Part 1 crimes or something that I want to make available, I don't necessarily want to upload those to ArcGIS Online. The question was, is there a way to push that data out at a defined interval? And I guess there's really two ways to do that. One would be you could use your own ArcGIS server and connect to your Part 1 database and publish that out. So use your own infrastructure. So ArcGIS server supports that out of the box. You can connect to just about any flavor of database and publish that data from your own server as opposed to uploading it. Or you could either script that data to upload at a given interval. So there's a couple options you have there, and I'll let you talk about the incident maps, Chris.
Yeah, and thanks, Kevin, for that great answer. To Kevin's point, if you don't have a lot of IT resources that help you with things like ETL processes, but you need to be able to manage the regular maintenance of data that is on an open data site in ArcGIS Online, we have a tool to help you with that. It's a tool called the Public Safety Incident Map Solution. You'll find it at solutions.arcgis.com. And essentially what it lets you do is a couple of different things. First, it lets you, if you get data that comes to you in a non-GIS form but includes address information. So a lot of times analysts work with crime data that they get on an extract from an RMS system on a nightly basis that has some address information in it, and then they have to geocode that manually. What this particular solution does for you, it's a couple of scripts that you can set up that enable you to point to a file in a folder that gets updated on a regular basis and geocode that against a local geocoder if you have one, or if you want to use the Esri World Geocoder, you can use that. And then that's going to put that data into a local geodatabase for you and also publish that data into an existing feature service that you have in ArcGIS Online. So those two scripts you can use them, put them into Windows Task Scheduler to run that process automatically on a nightly basis. Really exactly meant to support the workflow that Kevin just described, and in this particular case is a great way in which you can use those scripts to support that regular process of automatically updating services that are in ArcGIS Online that are connected to your open data site where you would want to have constantly refreshed data like Part 1 crime data.
All right, thanks, Chris. And the last question is around, we've had actually 2 or 3 questions regarding security. Folks asking about how secure is the open data site, and if you had sensitive data, could you store that in the cloud? CGIS compliance. I guess a couple different questions regarding that. What are some of the options I guess people have for sharing data?
Sure. Well, right. So obviously trying to make sense of police data when you're dealing with data that you might deliver out to the public versus internal purposes data that has to follow CGIS requirements, it can be really tricky for everyone. data that's stored in ArcGIS Online, the data that you're going to make available for public consumption. Now, obviously, that's not data that has to fit CGIS regulations. It's really data that's got personal identifiable information, things of that nature that you need to really be concerned with. And there's a variety of ways that you can handle that sensitive data using ArcGIS. The first way is to kind of have two connected systems. So for public-facing content, you'd have ArcGIS Online that it sits in the cloud with your non-sensitive data for all the stuff that you want to do with public-facing stuff. And you could have on-premises ArcGIS Enterprise, which delivers the same set of capabilities, but to your internal audience inside your firewall, so you can maintain that CGIS compliance. Now, if ArcGIS Enterprise isn't really a good fit for you, one thing that you can also do while working with ArcGIS Online is stand up an ArcGIS server inside your premise that has your CGIS compliant data sets, arrests, FIs, things of that nature, and that data sits on premise inside your server, but while you're on your network that you can access externally, you can use ArcGIS Online with that data as long as you're inside your network, and you still remain CGIS compliant because the data still stays inside your network, it resides in your network. But then when you're outside of your network, on the general internet, and you use your ArcGIS organization, you won't be able to access that data. So that's another way in which customers are leveraging the flexibility of ArcGIS deployment to deal with both kind of public-facing data needs as well as CGIS compliance needs.
Okay, yeah, and I think we've covered most of the questions we have, so we can wrap up.
Great. Thanks a lot for your help, Kevin, today. I really appreciate it. Hey, one other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up for the day is this webinar is part of an ongoing webinar series that we on the Esri Public Safety team do on a monthly basis. So every other month it's law enforcement, but we also have fire webinars, emergency management webinars, CAD 911 webinars, and national security webinars. If you like this kind of content and learning a little bit in an hour, take a look at our website and some of the historical webinars that we've done. All the recordings are there, and even though maybe it's not law enforcement content, there's a ton of useful training material that gets done in these webinars that you may find very relevant to you. So take a look at that when you get a chance. And I did also want to just briefly promote the next webinar that we'll be doing in August. We're very excited in the next month or so to be releasing a new suite of free-to-use and download solutions that help public health agencies, law enforcement agencies, state and local communities to deal with the opioid epidemic. So solution maps and apps that support treatment, response, prevention, and education. I know it's something that a lot of agencies are struggling with right now. We think that some of these apps will be real quick ways for those of you who are trying to get your head around how to combat the opioid epidemic to capture and leverage that data to help you work smarter. So that'll be released at the end of June, and our next webinar, which is in August, will be a run-through of all of those solutions that we've recently made available. It's pretty exciting, and I hope you'll join us for that because I think hopefully you'll find it very useful. If you saw anything on here that you want more information on, you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me by email at cdelaney@esri.com. You can follow me on Twitter at @cdelaneygis. Normally joining me, but who is unavailable today, was John Beck, our Global Law Enforcement Manager. John's available at jbeck@esri.com and on Twitter at @GISCop. Thanks again, everybody, for coming today. If you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with me afterwards, and have a great rest of the day.